Hello and welcome. This is the Bytes vs. Bytes podcast. I'm your host, I'm Grigic, and today with me are Resad and Faris Zacina. They are both the founders for Ministry of Programming, and I would like to welcome you to the show, guys.
Hey, Amr, thank you for inviting us. It's a great honor to be here.
Yeah, this is the first time that I have two guests, so that's going to be a little bit of an experiment as well. But I enjoy having you guys on. So could you tell a little bit about yourselves and also how you got to start the Ministry of Programming?
Yeah, sure. So in 2015, we started with Ministry of Programming. At the time, we were living in two different cities. I was in Stockholm and Faris was in Sarajevo, in Bosnia. And even at that time, our network was already pretty interesting. I was a lead developer at Fishbrain, and Faris was doing a lot of stuff in the music tech industry. He was working on with a company called Mixed in Key in Miami. For example, Fishbrain was one of the top 50 digital startups in Europe in 2016, and also this company Mixed in Key, where Faris was working, is one of the flagship names in the DJ industry. The software is used by big names like David Guetta, Hardwell, etc. We knew how to build great stuff. We knew how to basically make companies succeed. We had quite a few startup experiences already, and then it was like a combination of things that made us start MOP. One of the reasons was basically that we wanted to leverage all of that knowledge we accumulated over the years, the connections and everything else, and we wanted to help other people to spin new things. The second reason was the actual struggle that I was going through when I was in Stockholm, because I was like an economic migrant, and I just needed constantly something to fuel my starting life there, and I was, let's say, pushing Faris a little bit to leave the comfort zone. So yeah, I don't know, maybe Faris can tell a couple of things as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also definitely started from Resad's economic struggles living abroad and trying to make a living in a big expensive city. But it also is exactly the environment where many startups operate in. Like if you look at San Francisco or Silicon Valley, or if you look at London or Stockholm, you have this environment where everything is very expensive and people are trying to build new companies. So I believe that was also definitely very important for us. That Resad was up there in one of these startup ecosystems, and then we realized that we should try to do something that's fun for us as well, because we worked with many other companies and we have seen a lot of bad things and good things in companies we worked with. And then we decided, okay, let's start our own company. Let's try to make it at least incrementally better and a great place to work for us, but also for the people we want to employ.
Yeah.
And I believe that culture that we created was also one of the key factors why we managed to build a successful company as well.
Yeah. So how was it? Because you guys are brothers. Are you twin brothers? You look alike, so I'm asking. That's the reason I'm asking. How was it for you guys to, as brothers, to start a company together? Because usually people say, yeah, you should keep those two things separated. But how was it for you guys to start that? Maybe Resad can start off.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for us, what was very natural, because as twin brothers, we always kind of did things together from the early age. There was even a time when we even coded on the same workstation. It was maybe up until the second year of university that we got separate computers. And as our financial situation was not stellar and we couldn't afford two computers, this was, a thing that we just had to make it work at the time. And this made us very, very efficient as a working unit. And we learned how to pair program and co-create things. it also improved the efficiency of each other when leading the work at the workstation, because the other guy was always watching and giving comments, and the other one had prime time on the keyboard. So so it was like was funny. We were working with scarcity, and we not a lot of resources. We first started with Photoshop and design work to earn some money at university, and we did also music production for fun. And eventually we ended up pair programming and studying at university as well on the same workstation. So that's how we began. Later, it was just rolling into this collaboration at MOP, and we did that as well as a family. And the interesting part is that a big part of our family and friends actually played key roles in the company evolution. And I agree with you. It could be hard sometimes to start anything with relatives because of the emotional connections, and sometimes you cannot be 100% objective. But in our case, it actually was a very, very good experience so far, and it was just a learning experience for us as well. As we mentioned, it all started from Sweden when Amra and I were there, and we kind of we had this struggle, and then we brought Faris into that struggle, and we just started to get everything together to make sure that MOP is a reality. And then our sister joined, to spin the office in Sarajevo. So we already had, like, at the time, 4 family members in the company, and we were consistently adding more and more people from our circle of friends, etc. And it just worked, Actually, there are many family companies in the world that people don't know about, like BMW. They don't know that they are family companies. Like for example, BMW is a family company, and many other ones that are quite successful.
Yeah. And how was that for you, Faris?
I think it's. I wouldn't repeat what Resad said. Maybe I can just complement with an additional comment, which is, if you look at Puritan, business theory or even feedback from many people, I think most will agree with you that working with family is really hard. And then the thing is, because as Resad said, you have this lack of objective, kind of opinion, and like some sort of distance, like safe distance when you do things, and then like private life and work life mix much more, of course. But from the other angle, I would say that what is very positive is trust, because in traditional business context, when you find, let's say, a startup finds it's like 2 co-founders that don't know each other, or maybe they're just friends from high school or the faculty. What is the probability that they will actually stay in the business together for 5, 10, 15 years, while we as a family, even like if shit happened with the company, I'm pretty sure we will just stay together, and make it work. So the thing is, that trust factor is often underappreciated, I would say, when people talk about working with family, while of course there are many logical reasons to say many disadvantages, but I believe that we are making it work.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is when I think about it in that context, it seems to me that it would be easier to give each other feedback, even though sometimes it's hard to be objective, of course. But it seems to me that it's easier to say something to someone, for example, your brother or whatever, than someone that's maybe a stranger or whatever. You can be more honest if that makes sense. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I would say it's too easy, like that's the problem, because then, as far as said, you end up mixing like this private and work life, and whoever tried it is gonna say the same thing, but eventually, as far as said, it's a great thing. And one thing that we haven't mentioned is actually this family atmosphere, that we built up inside the company for that reason, because starting from the space where we work, the atmosphere, caring about people, making everyone feel at home. We just we just know what people have literally for breakfast, what car they drive, where they spend their evenings. We know everything about them. And that's why we nail the culture part, and it's very strong for that reason.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
To come back to your point, Amr, I think it's a very good point. I think it's very easy to be honest, and that creates a very good culture of of disagreements, of constructive disagreement, and different points of view. Because we are twins, for example, but but I do believe we are very different. And the thing is, we can still give very honest feedback to each other and be skeptical about many things, and then maybe sometimes gonna heat up, but then we resolve it very quickly. And I think that creates a very good way of operating, because if I do something, I'm pretty sure that Resad will be very skeptical about it, and then we're going to question it and find a better path. And I try to do the same with Resad. So I think this culture where we agree to disagree is very important for operating.
Yeah, for sure. And to get back to you guys as a company, so could you tell a little bit about what you do and how you operate?
Yeah, I can start again. It's actually it's very simple to explain what MOP does. Since 90% of startups fail, what we do is that we increase the odds for the startups to succeed. And what we are addressing to make that happen is actually the product part and the recruitment part. So we offer a software services designed for startups, which includes product management, design, development. And basically, we just try to be the service company that startups were dreaming of. We help them with whatever we can to make them not fail.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's actually like a special type of service company, because most consultancies are not designed to actually work with startups. Also, if you look at the larger ecosystem, I think it's very tough for early stage companies in Stockholm or London or Berlin to succeed, because they have, for example, you have several options in terms of recruitment. You can hire your own team, or you can just hire external consultants or freelancers. But all of these options are really tough, and we can get into that more if you like. But whoever works in San Francisco or Stockholm knows what I'm talking about. And I think it's on the product side. The problem is that most consulting companies are not really built to work with startups or new products. And then they offer like a cookie cutter approach to software development, where you can rent an iOS developer or an Android developer, but they don't actually really have experience with startups, or they don't actually know as an organization, let's say, how to address problems that startups have. So we try to be a special type of organization that is actually designed to work with startups, and I think that's our unique value proposition.
Yeah. So those startups that come to you, are those how are they usually formed? So are there people on, for example, if I started a startup, I have some technical knowledge, of course, technical background, but not everybody has that. But some people do have a great idea, for example. So how is that? How does that look on your end? So do you have a lot of people that also have a technical background, or are they usually the guys with or girls with a great idea that want to build it out?
Yeah, it's usually the latter. So we are the ones that bring the technical expertise in most cases, but there is no hard rule. We as we work a lot with referrals and with our big network of people that we know all over the world, we just find people as well organically, and they come to us. So it's always like a different combination of spices that goes in there.
Yeah, I would say like our early adopters were non-technical founders that were kind of looking for a more technical co-founder. And there are many companies across the world trying to solve this problem in different ways, because the elitistic class in Silicon Valley would tell you that you need to really hire your own team, have a CTO on board or a technical person as a co-founder. But actually, if you look at the 99% of the startups, they actually cannot do that, because it's just a problem to find a co-founder or a co-founder that is technical. So I think it's if we don't take the elitistic standpoint where you say, okay, like it's very possible to find a perfect co-founder, then we actually want to serve the underdogs and to try to help the remainder of the startups work and be more successful. But I also think that of course, we'll look for more experienced founders now as we evolve the company, and we try to look for serial entrepreneurs, and that is our optimal profile. But still, we appreciate and support the underdogs as well, because we have this idealistic view that entrepreneurship is really a noble cause, and these people should not be left on the sidelines because they don't have a technical co-founder.
Yeah. So how are you organized? So I know there are a lot of people working for you from Sarajevo. So where are you all based at? And is it more of a remote company in that sense? How should I see that?
Yeah, it's a remote friendly company, so we will always have people working from Thailand, or we have a couple of employees somewhere in Chiang Mai, or places like that. And in terms of the majority of the people is in Sarajevo. We do also have people in Miami and in Stockholm, so it's a combo of people from different places. And as I said, we are very remote friendly, so it doesn't matter where people are at a specific moment. We eventually see ourselves as a global company, and we are also working more on making us present in more geographical locations as well.
Okay, so are those more the technical people behind it, or also like because I don't know if you really have any sales, if you can call it like that, because you're looking for startups that need founders. Is there also some kind of a sales component there? How should I see that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we are primarily trying to solve a product and recruitment problem. So because these are the two problems that early stage companies have first, right? And the product problem requires, if you think about it, like product managers, designers, developers, DevOps, QA, all of these people that are in this discovery and development process to discover product market fit, basically, and to build a product that has initial traction. On the other hand, the recruitment problem is just a fact. In many of these cities, it's almost impossible to recruit. The cycles are 6 to 9 months. So we also have people that can help startups recruit, like on site or in a more outsourced way. But the thing is, we are thinking about adding on top of these things in the future. For now, I would say that we are not like really focused on sales and business development in our offering. We do act as an advisory structure, so very often we are in boards, or we take C-level or VP positions in startups. And the thing is, we advise on many strategic things in business development, but that is not something we offer as a service. With a price tag to the startups we work with. So we try to focus on a few things and do them well.
Yeah, so it's more of a network kind of thing, as you mentioned before, where you're heavily dependent on, of course, other people knowing other people, and finding those kind of people from that kind of network as well. So how because as you mentioned before, a lot of startups fail, especially in the first kind of phase of kind of their development. So how do you maximize the probability of that not happening? Because that seems a little bit tricky to me, because it has multiple facets to it.
Yeah, I can maybe start, and then Faris can fill in. Yeah. It's like obviously the main component is the technology and the recruiting. So we make sure that people spin the MVP, or sometimes we even get in when there is already a platform that exists. So basically we just take over or build something in the proper way, and we make sure that it has some longevity. So there is no need to do like fuller rights later, or to hire another team in an unknown part of the world. So that's the first part, where we de-risk the actual infrastructure and the platform where everything is running on. And of course, we make sure that the team is stable. So we had situations where we were approached by some pretty big companies and with pretty big teams where literally like all the team left in Stockholm, or there was a fight and then like 4 key people quit, etc. We are just making sure that that doesn't happen on our end, and that we have the technology part as stable as possible. The second part is, as I said, the recruiting, and that sometimes involves even non-technical roles, as Faris said. And we help them recruit in the cities where they are based, even for marketing personnel, or even a CTO, or whatever they might want or need, and what makes sense at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's it's about de-risking, as Resad said, because like if you look at startups, there are many theories about why startups fail in the 90%. In the end, probably you can really aggregate a lot of these into a financial problem and the iteration problem, because in the end, if you look at an early stage startup, to even iterate, to even do the first iteration, very often you need to spend a significant amount of time and money recruiting a team, and then building that internal culture to actually push forward really quickly. And then you need to have the technical chops and knowledge to roll out an MVP, let's say optimally in 6 weeks or less. But even a few months is really like a big win for most startups. But the thing is, this is not what actually how it works on the ground. And we see that startups have 6 to 9 month recruiting cycles. Then they cannot really hire the optimal people to execute. And then when they hire a team, maybe externally it looks like they're doing well, but the thing is, internally we see that a lot of startups are struggling to build the technology and to release as soon as possible a stable MVP that can collect feedback from the market. So we try to de-risk these things, and then of course with our advisory role and talking to the founders, and we try to also attack different other risks that they have.
So how does it work when, for example, the startup does become successful, and then eventually they see that they want to have something in-house anyway? So how does that transition look like? Have you had that kind of experience already?
Yes, that's a good question. We are not only doing, let's say, the service work for startups, we also invest in them in the sweat equity model. And for us, it's generally important, if we hold equity in a startup, to make it succeed. So to not have that kind of conflict of interest, and a part of that is as well letting go our own people that are working on the startup and hiring locally for them. So let's say if the startup is in Amsterdam, we're going to help them to hire whatever roles make sense to make the team the most efficient. So the idea is to hire the best people and to transition to the best combination. Sometimes it's a remote team, sometimes it's a full local team, sometimes it's a combination. And we do that in a very nice way that allows the startup for the maximum growth.
I would say it has to do a lot with the outcomes, and as Resad said, it can be very different combinations. We always try to be very flexible and adapt to the real problems we have, not the imaginary problems. And I think it's if you look at startups, it's sometimes full remote like works really well, and then we don't really need to hire like a local team. There are even companies that don't have an office, which we actually like a lot. Like Basecamp and many other startups like that are completely remote. Actually, the company I was working with called Mixed in Key was also fully remote. That was the last company I worked with before MOP. And there was no office, and we actually understand the value of the gig economy and kind of being on the remote culture. But also some teams maybe have a very strong need to be on site, and they want to be like an on-site culture, and they actually believe maybe more traditional ways of operating. And then we are going to support that as well. So we are not really ideological about that. We try to adapt to whatever the founders want to set up. And then, as we said before, we try to be the founder's best friend in a way that we want to make the product succeed. and then whatever is needed in that process, we're gonna actually support with.
Yeah. So just add one more thing, Amr. I mean, it's very important for your listeners to understand that this model is actually like even many times it cannibalizes your own profits. So it's not something that a lot of people would do. So it's more like a long-term play instead of the short-term play, because if you are, let's say, renting people that are going to help in a specific startup, then you need to remove them, then it directly affect the revenues. And we always look for the long term. So that's why the company is very unique from that point of view.
Yeah, and I mean it makes sense, especially if you take an equity in a startup, that you, even if you don't provide those services anymore to them, that you still want them to succeed, even though they maybe go on to have an in-house team or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So to get back to the kind of starting phase of a startup, because a lot of people hang up on picking technologies and picking the newest stuff and looking at what they're going to use to build their product. So how do you look at that? So how would you go about that when you're first starting building something for a startup?
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem I'm trying to write about and think recently, and the short version of that answer is just choose a familiar technology and go with that, because I think that the actual goal, or even the first OKR of a startup, is to launch as soon as possible and get the first feedback from the real users. So the technology is not actually something you should be concerned about from a let's say as the basic key result or basic goal, like choosing a technology as a target. But actually that is only something you need to do to achieve the actual goal, which is launching. And prototyping and MVPs are definitely a useful method we use to create things quickly. But again, I mean, all of these things are as useful as the feedback you get from them. And then the question is what technologies to use actually, and how to choose them. And there are many situations where there are context specific answers, like maybe you need to use unfamiliar technologies in some situations, like maybe you are building a machine learning system and maybe Python is really the best choice and you're not familiar with it. But most of the time, I would say that it's smart to choose technologies for rapid development and technologies you are familiar with. Inside the company, we historically promote a specific set of technologies because we believe they were a good baseline for the specific context we operate in. So Node.js and Golang were kind of like the main two programming languages we promoted historically, because we believe they strike a good balance between productivity, simplicity, but also familiarity inside of our company. And then also because we knew that most of the work on the startups is going to be input output. So writing from a database, reading from a database, writing to a database, calling external APIs, etc. So we kind of knew that if we choose these technologies, the probability that it's not a complete miss in terms of technological architecture and technology choice is going to be pretty high, because these technologies are really built for input output. But in the end, I mean, coming back to my main point is it's more about launching quickly, and then familiarity is the most important parameter that any team should look at. And this is why we decentralize this decision. So we're not really imposing the technology from a company level. So we look at the teams and we give them the opportunity to choose what they're familiar with to bootstrap as quickly as possible.
Mm. How do you look at that, Rashad?
Yeah, I think Faris said it well. It's just about being pragmatic at the moment. You just look at the team, look at the needs of the startup, and you just make the best decision. I mean, we were developers for about 10 years, Faris and I, and we know exactly how people make choices usually. There are a lot of either fanboys out there on people that are not experienced enough, or there is new hot technology that everyone wants to use, and we want to try it in this product. And I mean, we even see it with some more senior people. because as soon as something new comes out, everyone is crazy about it and they want to try it on a production product. And I mean, it's not usually the best thing to do.
Yeah. Also, one thing that is maybe even the best piece of advice would be if you can use off-the-shelf technology. I mean, we actually, it's not very sexy for programmers, but we've seen a lot of companies succeed with this model. A few health tech companies in Stockholm come to mind that we worked on, and then the thing is, because I think that programmers want to work with complex things, and that is usually a big problem. And but if everybody knows that their objective is actually to launch as soon as possible, I think that also the average programmer that loves a specific programming language that is very complicated or a specific architecture is going to be more than willing to drop it for the sake of achieving the common goal. So I think it's all about putting the objective in perspective for everybody and understanding that the goal is not to build a perfect architecture, a state-of-the-art software or anything like that. The goal is actually to launch as soon as possible and collect feedback. So, yep.
And that's a good point. I'd like to add to that as well, where when we're building a project, for example, what we're doing right now is what I hammer on a lot is also like the community support, right? Where sometimes you can find some obscure thing that will probably solve your problem, but if it's not supported or it's been outdated or whatever, just don't go for it, because it will hurt you in the long run. That's something that a lot of people underestimate, right? Where they pick a particular language, whatever it is, because one of the developers loves it so much, but they don't look at, okay, is that language going to be around in 2 or 3 years, right? And that's something that I kind of stress a lot in our team as well, where I say, listen, this is something that we need to work with for a few years. Of course, you can pick your own front-end framework that you like, or whether it's Vue or whether it's Angular or whatever it is. If it makes it possible to reach the goal, then it's fine, right? And if you see that it's supported by a lot of people and it probably won't go away in 2 or 3 years, that's also fine. So that's something that I wanted to add, is that using the latest and greatest, of course, sometimes is fun, and I know why developers like that, but it's not always the best choice, right? The best choice is going for, especially if you're building a long-term kind of thing, to go for something that's tried and true, and where you see, I don't know, for example, if you're working on your backend, you're doing Java or something like that. There are a lot of people that know that language, that there's a huge community out there. If it's a good community or not, that's not the point, but there is a community behind it. And that's something that I just wanted to add.
You're completely right, Amr, and I just want to add one more thing on top of this. Like, I'm going to add one concrete example. When you look at the Stack Overflow survey and the statistics about the biggest number of people per technology, you can see exactly like how some types of stack, let's say you want to use Elixir or something like that, there's a much lower number of available developers that are going to do Elixir compared to, let's say, Node.js or Golang or something like that. And even a situation that we had was, which is a cautionary tale about also involving a lot of different people from all over the world without proper guidance, is that in one of our products we introduced Scala at the time. And I mean, we all know that Scala is a great technology, and like it can be leveraged to build some pretty nice and performant systems. But what we experienced is that it was after this technology was introduced by a Russian colleague that joined as a remote worker to be a part of the team. Then after that, we really struggled to hire Scala developers down the line. So there is a cautionary tale about allowing, like, let's say, anyone to have a say in the technology, the technology footprint of the company. And I mean, on the contrary, if you have a good enough team, they should be able to pick up anything. But let's be honest. I mean, how many people have like a team of 10 wizards. It's usually like it's usually like a combo of more and less experienced people, and not everyone are super proficient at picking up everything that you throw down their alley.
Yeah. Exactly, and I think this also kind of coming back to our, let's say, baseline technologies. We definitely choose them exactly for this reason, because they have, as you said, like a big community and also like big module ecosystems where people create a lot of things in the open source, so you can kind of assemble your Lego blocks and build a startup. And I think JavaScript, Golang, and technologies like that are really great to build quickly. And I think also that what you described, Namar, is really, really important, because it has to do with the recency bias, because people actually value a lot what they were bombarded with in marketing and in recent weeks. Let's say, for example, if a new version of Python comes out, you can pretty much bet that a lot of people will talk about it and promote it and like make a hype around it. And that's what happens with most frameworks. When they come out, they are the tool to use on new products. And then there is this fine line between hobbies and production projects, where people don't really differentiate these two things. Okay, maybe it's good to try the new framework, but then do you actually want to do that on a production project? And I agree completely. I think it's about community longevity, but also about familiarity. And have you actually used that technology in production? I think that's a very good question.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's something that that happens a lot. That happened with Docker as well. If you look at the in the infrastructure world, where everybody was like, "Yeah, Docker, you need to use it," and nobody's running it in production, or things like serverless or whatever, and everybody was like, "Yeah, we need to use it." Okay, but why do you even want to use it? Right? That's the first question is, why do you want to use it? If it is because you want it to perform and scale, and you don't want to think about it, fine, use it, right? That's what it's for. But if you are just doing it to use it, I think that's the wrong kind of perception to look at it. We of course also try and experiment with new things. That's not different than any other company, but it's just a small part, and we try to do it as start as small as possible and see if it works. And that's the key difference there, I think.
As an experiment.
Sorry, and my fellow developers, are gonna hate me for saying this, but like half of the web is running on PHP, man, and most of the corporations are still using .NET, Java, and Oracle, and that's the ugly truth,
Mm.
Yeah, exactly.
I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, also there is like a contrarian thought to what we are talking about, and I mean, if you look at what Paul Graham was writing about in his article called "Beating the Averages," I mean, what he talked about was that when they built this startup in 1995 called Via Web, they were using Lisp, and then kind of Lisp was almost like a superpower, because nobody was using Lisp at the time, and then they could have like a technology that gave them special capabilities, and but also it attracted people that were true hackers to the company. And I mean, there is some truth to this. I mean, for example, when we actually started using Docker, which you mentioned in the company, it was a bit early, I would say. It wasn't like a very pragmatic decision, maybe. But actually, it also attracted some really good people to the company, because they wanted to work with the latest and greatest technologies. So I mean, there are many different trade-offs that we are making here. I would say it's not necessarily that there is one single cookie cutter advice, but in general, familiarity is very important. I think that's our bottom line.
Yeah, and the thing is, when I think about when I think back to the different project that we did, we also picked Docker, for example, and went with microservices. We were like, okay, we need to microservice everything, and what we ended up with was a lot of microservices. Where the need wasn't even there for microservices, right? And that's that's the thing. It was the hype at that time, and everybody was like, okay, you need to build as small pieces as possible. But what we didn't think about, or what we didn't think about enough, was the complexity that goes into managing all that stuff, right? Where you all have let's say you have 8 microservices or something like that. You need to manage that somehow, and that takes time, and that takes resources that you as a small company don't have. You don't have that. You're not Google or something like that. That's something to to think about as well when starting off in a project like this, I think. So what do you see for the future? So because looking at the startups and how they start, what do you see changing there in the future?
How do you mean? Can you just elaborate?
Yeah, sure. So, say for instance, startups usually now are like looking for funding, investment, and stuff like that, and then they start building. And then, do you see that changing in somehow shape or form? Because you are already changing it a little bit by being some kind of a technical partner, but also maybe investing in them by having equity or whatever. So, how do you see that changing for other startups as well that you don't help at the moment?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I think it's actually a very good question. I think it's things will definitely change because I mean how we see it, but maybe we're really really wrong. I think it's that the startup ecosystems are a bit broken, unfortunately, and we see that you have VCs pushing huge and insane amounts of money into tech companies that they don't really understand. WeWork comes to mind. And then then kind of they don't really provide more than money or networking to the companies they work with. Maybe there's a bit of bootstrapping or boot camps that they do, some smarter VCs, but usually it's just like very it's very oriented towards financing. And then you have these public agencies which are giving grants to companies, but these grants are not really enough to start up. Like these public agencies in Stockholm are doing a really good job, but most of the startups are really left out, and they get like very little funding from public grants. Then you have these consulting companies which are not really helping too much startups as well, because they don't believe in startups. They cannot make good margins on startups, and then also there are just other more lucrative projects. And then I think you have also other components in the ecosystem, and I think this is a problem, because the reason that 90% startups fail is not that people have shitty ideas or that they have also they couldn't find product market fit, or that they very often it's a problem of financing, iteration, and support structures to enable that. Because in the end, it's if you can iterate 37 times on your product and you are decently intelligent, I'm pretty sure that over time you're going to learn from your failures and mistakes, and then you're going to be able to build a decently successful company. So I believe that I don't know what's going to happen exactly in the future. It's very hard to forecast these kind of things, to foresee the future. But I think that we're going to see structures that are going to be more supportive for startups in the early stage, I think. Because the opportunity for monetary gains is also in the early stage. Because if you invest in the early stage, if you are there in the early stage, you reap a lot of benefits. So we'll see. I don't know, Rashad, do you have anything to add?
I think you answered it well. So we're going to see like a rise of different types of organizations and companies that are going to be a support for the whole timeline of a startup. And it's not enough to just go in there as an investor and give me your metrics. I'm gonna spray and pray on those numbers and think that something magical is gonna happen. Like, you get my point. It needs to go down more to the actual quality and to the true facts and to checking stuff and to working with people and at every stage of the company. I've seen some pretty high-profile investors not even checking the numbers that were given to them, and I'm gonna tell you, everyone like believes in this notion that we should completely trust like everyone that we work with, and of course that we are trying to do that as well. But eventually, I think that even investors are gonna need to pay more attention at what they're investing in, and to do more checks to make sure that they have they have a stable situation in a startup. A lot of startups still, unfortunately, are a little bit beautifying the numbers, and it's they're making it look bigger than they are, and I think the next generation of investors is gonna literally have access to the databases and to check stuff themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's gonna de-risk the investments. I mean, from our end, we are helping with one part. There are many parts of the startup evolution that where people need help. And as Faris said, probably if this was the case, and if people were putting more hours into understanding the actual problems and needs, then we might see even a 20 to 30% increase in the overall success rates.
Yeah, I think the main problems, or at least one of the problems that I've seen happening, is that investors are tricky because they usually just bring in money, right? And they say, okay, I want a stake in the company, I'll give you this amount of money, but they don't really follow through on, because they, as you said, they are kind of investing on multiple things, right? Where they are like, okay, I have 10 startups that I'm investing in right now. They can't help all those 10 startups at once, right? Where they can actually contribute to something to make it a success. So they're putting their trust into the founders, and then the thing is that they really need to. They need to trust those founders and see that they have that thing to bring that startup to a success, and that's really hard to do based on a few conversations that you have with someone, right? Because someone can give you a great presentation about what the startup will actually be and where they think it will go, but that doesn't have to be the reality of how, and usually it's not the reality of what happens in the real world, if you can call it like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you look at San Francisco, one of the main reasons why this whole everything happened in Silicon Valley is because people were tremendously ethical and moral about everything that they do, and the whole ecosystem was built on top of that. And now, as we see more startup cities and more startup environments being built all over the world, it also means different cultures, different ways of doing business, different kinds of people, and definitely one of the main things is actually if you can trust the people that you're working with, and because that if you know that they are good people, eventually, I mean, at least you're not going to have these problems we're talking about now.
And also, to connect to the people point, I think it's I mean, everything starts from the team. And the thing is, why Silicon Valley worked, it was exactly because you had this network of trust. Let's say 100 people. Some people say there were like 100 people that were actually helping each other and sharing their information and paying it forward in a way. And then the whole ecosystem evolved bottom up. From these people, from these initial founders that were like sharing and trusting each other, as Resad said. And then also helping recruit for each other, and and then the investor problem and all of these other problems we're talking about were not that amplified, because these people were actually mentoring each other and helping each other succeed. And something similar happened in Stockholm, as we can see, even though there is not like hard data to support this hypothesis, but many people say that it's the same thing. There were like a few dozen people that exited their companies, wanted to help each other, and then they were like reinvesting in the ecosystem and building new companies. And then even the PayPal mafia and the similar examples support that idea. And I think it's all about building a community where you have support. That community acts as an educational structure, which is something very important for entrepreneurs, because in the end, a lot of these problems are exacerbated by the fact that entrepreneurs don't really have a place to learn how to be entrepreneurs. And there are many theories that say that people cannot be educated to be entrepreneurs. I'm on the opposite side of thinking that actually people can be educated. But I understand why people are saying that. And I think, that's actually, if you look at the data, if you look at what people do in schools of entrepreneurship, etc., or MBAs, you can see that actually these people don't come out as entrepreneurs that are going to make a success right away. So I think education is a very big component, and that very often starts from the people you work with, and it's more like it's like a peer-to-peer educational experience.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, you can almost learn anything by going to school and seeing that, but actually starting a company is something that's you live and you learn, as you could call it. I mean, it's the same way for starting a software project as well, where if you haven't done it before and haven't been in that position of being a product owner or whatever, you learn along the way that. Stripping down for example in the first version is the most important thing to look at really what do you need for the real bare bones and MVP has been called in this call as well, but I look at it a little bit different where I say you need to have a first version that's actually marketable in the sense that you could sell it to other people if you're looking at a SaaS, for example, or whatever. And you need to look at, okay, what's the bare minimum that someone needs to actually use the product, and then you can go from there. And that's something I think is important for a startup as well to look at. So I have one more question to wrap up. And that's it's a question for both of you, of course. So what are you most proud of since you started this whole journey of starting Ministry of Programming?
Yeah, maybe I can start and then Faris can fill because it's just making this coordination effort to
Yeah,
because it's the first time that you have two people on the other end.
for sure.
I mean we're very proud of the company that we have built because it's surpassing the actual geographical locations where we are present. And I think we have a unique culture and unique network of people that we work with. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of because we have built something like a really good cultural network that is gonna fuel the success for the coming years, and is gonna as well fuel success for a lot of people that work in our network, not necessarily through this traditional outsourcing or software services model, or however you want to call it, but also in many other ways as we discussed. And we can also see that we are moving the needles, and that we're actually contributing to make people more successful, to raise the odds of succeeding. So that's one of the things that I'm most proud of, and I think we have a very bright future. So Faris, what do you think?
I would say I'm very proud that we built an amazing place to work where we enjoy to work, where it's fun, where we can come and and kind of work with amazing founders and employees that are building really creative things, because I think riding the wave of innovation, as we say, is really interesting, because we often end up in directions that are not really something we were planning to do. Like, for example, now we work a lot with smart cities and IoT or mental health, and we're solving very important problems. And I think that's something that I'm really proud of. I'm not saying we're good at it, and I often say we are not actually startup experts, because I actually believe that you would need to, work 200 years in this domain to be an expert, because it's so complicated. But that is exactly why it's fun, because you learn endlessly, and you iterate and you grow as a person, and you watch companies fail and succeed. So I'm really glad we built this system. And also I'm really glad I could I can work with my brother and our extended family every day, because that trust and that safety, it's a psychological safety that you cannot really get maybe working for somebody or with unknown people. So yeah, I mean, there are many things we could talk long, but we're very grateful, I would say, to have the opportunity even to do this and have a profitable company, which is very important.
Very cool, very cool. So thanks, guys, of course, for your time. Where can people find you on the internet?
I mean, we are present on of course, our website, so ministryofprogramming.com, and also social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn as well. So feel free to reach out to us with any questions, or I mean, if we can help in any way, we're always happy to do so.
Okay, very cool. And thanks again, guys. It was fun to talk to you guys. I think we could go for hours, but we need to wrap up. So yeah, thanks. No problem. And of course, for the listeners, you can find the Bits vs. Bytes podcast on bitsvsbytes.com and also on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. It's all bitsvsbytes. And subscribe to the newsletter. You get 5 things every 2 weeks in your mail with interesting stuff about leadership, business, and technology. So you can find that on bitsvsbytes.com/newsletter. And I'd like to thank you for listening. Until next time.